All right. So I've got that one kind of colored and layered. I'm I'm also realizing that I have multiple references, and that's about as dark and as non-blue as I can make this reference. So maybe I want to go back to my sky reference and play with those direct adjustments on that. And really, I like to change every reference and make it kind of suit my own purposes. So I can push that maybe a little bit brighter, so it's more like the morning sun. Maybe a little dimmer, limit the light output so they're not too shiny. Maybe even, yeah, I think that'll work. And then the color balance is really going to affect it because I don't want it to be so warm. I'm going to shift it away from the reds, away from the yellows. See how, yeah, now that's really starting to help. And away from the magentas, but not too far. What's so great about digital art is you get to see your different options, and then you choose the best from what you can see. You can try a lot of things out. You can go really blue and see how that works. And that kind of fits with my scene. Then I can put some of the blue back in the shadows if I want to. Yeah, so again, that makes a big difference. Helps blend it in, just levels and color balance. And now we go to my next reference image here. With this sky. So notice that I have this overlap already. I might manually erase out more of this cloud. And I might use a really big brush to start fading out that mountain range, right? Because these need to kind of seam together for the moment. And before I start cutting away, like I could start cutting away from the sky immediately, but before I do that, let me play with the colors and the levels. And it's hard because it's so misty. But I'm going to limit the whites a little bit. Okay, then I'm going to play with the color balance and help give it a little bit of color. It's kind of devoid. So make it a little bit more in the blues. A little bit of greens. A little bit of yellows in the highlights. And that's why you can't like mix color reference with black and white reference. Color is a big part of blending images, unless you just want to take color out of everything. And then lastly, hue saturation. I can actually push the saturation a little bit, which I think I'm going to need to do for this to get a little bit more color. Probably about there. Feel like it could all go a little bit darker, like that. And now I can start softly at 100% opacity erasing out this sky. being mindful of those mountain peaks in the background. And the tree in the foreground, or the middle ground. Okay, now this might be where I use Magic Wand, because I want to select all of this range. Right. And I just want to work within it without affecting the tree. So you see the Magic Wand with contiguous turned on does a pretty good job. And I can even add to it. So this is the first time we're doing this. If I want to add to a selection, I already have a selection, I hold down Shift, and I use any selection tool. So I'm going to continue using the Magic Wand just to get these little specks inside the tree. And if I accidentally go too far, I can hit Command Z, go back. You get really refined selection. And then instead of just hitting delete, I'll do it by hand with my brush, which will give it a little bit more finesse using the eraser. So I don't want to delete everything. I want to get close to that mountain range without going over. So this way, the Magic Wand kind of helps me identify the tough areas I need to erase. It's like a stencil. So I'll do it on this end, then I'll hold down Shift and I'll add to it. Little dots. I don't know who said frozen pine trees when we were doing our brainstorming, but pine needles are pain. But then I erase by hand once I have the selection. So I can be heavy-handed around the tree, but then as we get closer to the mountains, I pull back a little bit. Let it ghost. All right, so there we have it. Beginning to have that scene happening where the overlaps all kind of work together. Now here's a specialized tool, which I don't usually show this early, but because these shadows and highlights are so much stronger, and I kind of like them than these ones, I have the option. I can push these shadows and highlights back further, or I could try to bring these out. And the way you bring them out is with photo retouching tools, which are called dodge and burn. So with all these shadows, I'm going to use the dodge and burn tools, which are just underneath the eraser, underneath the paint bucket, and underneath the little smudge tool. And so it looks like a hand cupped into a circle or a black lollipop. I'm going to start with the hand cupped into a circle, which is the burn tool. I'm going to set its options to midtones and its exposure, between 20 and 30. No more than 30. It's a really powerful tool. In fact, I might even want below 20, like 15. And then with a soft edge brush, I can kind of paint in these midtones and darken them up a little bit. Gets its term from the darkroom when you intentionally overexpose photo paper in selected areas. But it's important to limit it to the midtones when you start. So that way I get some nice shadows built up there. And I just did a lot of burning. You can see it in my history. And it made a big difference. But also you might overdo it, so try not to overdo it. Then, if I want to brighten areas, I would use the dodge tool. And again, on midtones, similar exposure, about 15. It's the strength of it. I can bring out some highlights, just little spots, kind of catch the light. Now that helps. It's kind of selected, hand touched up brightness and contrast. I like how all the trees are showing that. But then I can also go to my other reference here, and I can burn those midtones and darken them. And this might be where I want to burn the highlights a little bit. Knock those back. So it's like doing a levels adjustment, but controlling it with a stylus. So I can get these mountains to kind of work a little bit better. All right. The next layer I want to work with is this rock in the foreground. Save my progress. Okay, now with this is foreground, this is sharp. I want really clean selections. So if I use the magic wand, I want to limit its tolerance down from 32 to maybe something like 12. And even that's not smooth enough. So I might need to just draw it in with my lasso to get the really tight cutout that I want. And I can do it section by section, hit delete. Get that really smooth edge. Now this has enough contrast that this might be a good candidate for the quick selection tool. But you have to be careful with it. And so what I'll often do is the quick selection tool, but then I'll go back in with my lasso and I'll add to it or subtract from it. So here it's selected a little too much, of the rock where it wasn't as contrasted. So now I'm going to hold down Option to subtract from a selection. So you hold down Shift once you have a selection to add to it. You hold down Option to subtract from it. And by doing that, now I can kind of draw this line and subtract from the selection, from what I want to delete. I'll check the rest of it. Looks pretty good. Delete it fully at 100%. Let's try it again. Quick selection tool, which is in the same drawer as a magic wand. And the algorithm for it keeps getting better. It's pretty good, but I'm always going to check it and work with it. At the same time, I want overlap that's helpful. So here I'm going to erase this out because I think this could be a helpful transition. Right, this kind of block of ice. What's great about organic shapes like ice, rock, we can just kind of shape our own to some extent. And these will help me transition into other elements. Okay. So already I might reconsider my original sketch a little bit, because I wanted to have a starry sky and a moon, and I have my mountains right there on the top of my frame right there. So it feels like I could expand that a little bit without much harm. So maybe I'll do that. I'll take my move tool and I'll move my guide up a little bit. Give me a little bit more room. Nothing wrong with that. Now I have areas of transition that are problematic, right? And I don't think they're going to be saved by some of these other items. So this black rock is going to be nice. So I'm going to work with that next.